The moving truck rumbled away just as the late afternoon sun dipped behind the rows of near-identical houses. Angela Morris stood in the driveway, hands on her hips, squinting at the cardboard towers stacked high in her garage. Her scrubs clung to her frame, wrinkled from a 12-hour shift at St. Matthew's Hospital. She was bone-tired, but her heart was full. This house, modest but steady, was hers. A place where her kids could grow up with a backyard, where her mother could sit on the porch in the evenings, where she could breathe between the endless days and nights of caring for others. "Mom, look!" 8-year-old Jordan sprinted across the lawn, basketball bouncing unevenly across the grass. His sister Leah skipped behind him, braids flying. Their laughter rang through the cul-de-sac like wind chimes. Angela smiled. That sound. That was why she worked double shifts and stayed late with patients who had no one else. For them. For this. Across the street, curtains shifted. A woman with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a sharp blouse pulled tighter at her pearls as she whispered something to her husband. Another neighbor watering his lawn paused, his smile stiff, forced. Angela felt the prickle of eyes on her skin. She was used to stares. Working as a black nurse in a city hospital, she'd seen enough of them to stop flinching. But this was supposed to be home. Angela brushed it off. First impressions, she told herself. People just needed to know her. That evening, she sat on the porch steps, sipping tea while her mother rocked gently in the chair beside her. Fireflies blinked over the lawn. "You did good, Angie," her mother said softly, her voice warm with pride. "This house is yours. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise." Angela exhaled slowly, a hint of unease tugging at the edge of her thoughts. The HOA packet had been thick with rules. No overnight parking, no laundry on the porch, no toys left outside. Strict, almost suffocating, but she was determined. She had built her career brick by brick, fought her way through nursing school while raising 2 kids, held hands with patients through their last breaths and their first recoveries. She had earned this peace. The sound of children's laughter floated into the night. Angela leaned back, letting it wash over her. Whatever looks her neighbors had given, whatever whispers traveled behind lace curtains, she reminded herself. She had faced worse, and she was stronger now. This was her home, her sanctuary. At least, it was supposed to be. The first letter came only a week after Angela and her family settled in. It was printed on crisp white paper, tucked neatly inside an envelope slipped through the mail slot. The HOA's logo, a tidy tree framed by the words Maplewood Estates, Excellence and Order, was embossed at the top. Angela unfolded it with one hand while balancing a laundry basket in the other. "Dear Ms. Morris, we have noted a violation of HOA Regulation 7.3, parking restrictions. Vehicles are not permitted to remain in driveways overnight. Please correct this immediately to avoid further action." Angela sighed. Her car had been parked outside after her double shift because she hadn't wanted to wake her children wrestling with the garage door. It hadn't even crossed her mind. She shook her head, muttering, "Really? That's the priority?" The next morning, she tucked the letter into a drawer and went about her routine. Her patients didn't care where she parked. They cared that she showed up on time, calm and steady, ready to save their lives. But the letters kept coming. One scolded her for unsightly laundry because she'd hung her scrubs on the porch rail to dry after washing out bloodstains. Another warned her about improper play equipment when Jordan left his basketball hoop by the sidewalk. A third claimed her flower bed was not in compliance because her marigolds weren't the approved color scheme for Maplewood landscaping. Angela tried to ignore them at first, but the paper trail piled up like little threats. Each envelope felt heavier than the last. The neighbors didn't help. Karen Whitfield, the pearl-clutching woman Angela had spotted on move-in day, seemed to be everywhere, arms folded, lips pursed, whispering to others at the mailbox. One evening, as Angela returned from work still in scrubs, Karen stood at the curb, tapping her manicured nails against her phone. "You know," Karen began, her tone syrupy but sharp, "Maplewood Estates has standards. Parking on the street, laundry outside, children making a racket. It gives the wrong impression. This is a respectable neighborhood." Angela's jaw tightened. I work 12-hour shifts at the hospital. Sometimes I don't have the luxury of moving my car at midnight. Karen sniffed. Well, we all have responsibilities. You might find it easier if you adjusted your lifestyle. Angela stared at her, the words catching in her throat. Adjusted. The implication was clear. That night, Angela vented to her mother over a cup of chamomile tea. They're not writing me up for cars and clothes, Mama. They're writing me up for existing. Her mother reached across the table, squeezing her hand. Angela, you've walked hospital halls where death itself tried to follow you. You've faced worse than a few petty people hiding behind rule books. But don't ignore it. These things, they build. Angela nodded, staring at the neat stack of HOA letters in the drawer. Somewhere deep in her gut, she felt it too. The complaints weren't just petty. They were the start of something uglier. By mid-October, Angela had a drawer full of neatly stacked envelopes, each one colder than the last. They weren't warnings anymore, they were threats. Failure to comply may result in fines. Continued violations may be referred to legal counsel. Your membership in Maplewood Estates is at risk. Every line was written with the precision of a scalpel, but none cut as deep as the gossip that followed her every move. Karen's whispers had become open chatter. At the playground, Angela overheard two women murmur, "She's never home. Probably neglects her kids." At the grocery store, someone muttered, "Always in scrubs, looking tired. Hardly professional." Angela pushed through it all, shoulders straight, head high. She'd faced harder battles in the ICU, with lives hanging on beeping monitors. But what she didn't know was that the HOA's campaign was about to escalate. The letter reached her hospital first. It was addressed to Saint, Matthew's HR department, signed by Karen Whitfield as HOA president, written in the same clipped, respectable tone. To whom it may concern, we, the board of Maplewood Estates, feel compelled to raise serious concerns about one of your employees, Nurse Angela Morris. Her repeated lack of adherence to basic community standards raises questions about her judgment and professionalism. We fear that her conduct as a neighbor reflects poorly on her conduct as a medical professional. We urge you to evaluate her suitability for continued employment. The first time Angela heard of it, she was in the middle of prepping an elderly patient for surgery. Her supervisor, Maria Sanchez, pulled her aside gently. "Angela, don't panic," Maria said, holding the letter in her hand, her brows knitted. "We received this morning. The HOA claims you're unprofessional, that you shouldn't be working here." Angela froze, her gloves halfway on. "They're trying to get me fired?" Maria's voice softened. "It seems so. But listen, this letter doesn't say anything about your work here, and I know your work better than anyone." Angela's throat burned. She thought of every life she had touched, every patient who had whispered thank you with trembling hands. And now, some neighbor with pearls and a clipboard wanted to erase all of that. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table with the letter in front of her. Her children played in the living room, laughter drifting in like sunlight through a cracked door. But Angela felt heavy, as if the words on the page were chains pulling her down. "This is more than complaints now," she told her mother. "They're trying to take my livelihood, my calling, everything I've worked for." Her mother's eyes shone with both sorrow and fire. "Angela, these people don't know you, but this hospital does. Those patients do. You have more truth on your side than they'll ever have rules." Angela wanted to believe it, but as she slid the letter back into the drawer, alongside the others, she couldn't shake the fear. What if the HOA's poison spread further? What if the hospital began to doubt her, too? Angela walked into St. Matthew's the next morning with the same steady stride she always carried, but inside her stomach churned. The HOA letter burned in her mind like a neon sign. Unfit, unprofessional. Evaluate her suitability. Words that had nothing to do with her skills, her compassion, her years of service. Words meant only to tear her down. She passed the nurse's station, nodding to colleagues as she slipped into her scrubs. Maria Sanchez, her supervisor, caught her eye and gave a reassuring nod. It was a small gesture, but it steadied Angela more than she expected. Later that afternoon, during a rare lull, Maria pulled her aside. Angie, I showed that letter to Dr. Patel and a few others. Their reaction? Laughter, disgust. They said, anyone who's ever worked with Angela Morris knows better. Angela blinked. They believe me. Maria's voice was firm. Of course. You've been here 8 years. Patients adore you. Staff trust you. You've covered extra shifts, trained new hires, held hands in ICU rooms when no family could be there. No HOA letter can erase that. Angela swallowed hard, her chest tightening, not with fear this time, but with relief. That same day, she entered a patient's room. Mr. Lawson, a retired firefighter with lung trouble, grinned weakly when he saw her. Nurse Morris, I heard some nonsense floating around about people saying you shouldn't be here. Angela froze. Who told you that? He shrugged. Word spreads. But let me tell you something. His hand, veined and trembling, closed over hers. You sat with me through the night when I couldn't breathe. You kept me alive when I wanted to give up. If anyone tries to take you from this hospital, they'll have to go through me. And I know a whole lot of folks who'd say the same. Angela smiled, tears threatening. Thank you, Mr. Lawson. That means more than I can say. By the end of the week, it wasn't just Maria or Dr. Patel or Mr. Lawson. Stories began to ripple through the staff break room, through patient families, through the hospital's grapevine. She held my baby in the NICU when I couldn't be there. She found the lump the doctor missed. She saved my mother's life. She worked 3 shifts straight during the storm when half the staff couldn't get in. Angela didn't need to defend herself. Her work, her compassion, her years of sacrifice spoke louder than any letter could. At home that night, Angela told her mother what had happened. They're standing with me, Mama. Not just one or two, everyone. The doctors, the nurses, the patients. Her mother's face softened into a proud smile. See? You thought you were fighting this alone? But you're not. You've built something stronger than their hate. You've built a family here. Angela looked at her children playing on the rug, laughter spilling out again. For the first time since the letters began, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the HOA had started this fight, but she would not finish it alone. The HOA expected Angela to shrink. They expected the hospital to panic at the mere whiff of scandal, to treat her like a liability rather than an asset. But what they hadn't counted on was the sheer number of people who owed their lives, their peace, and their loved ones to Nurse Angela Morris. It started small. A patient's daughter, Emily Clark, posted on the neighborhood Facebook group, "My mom nearly died of pneumonia last year." Nurse Angela was the one who caught the warning signs, stayed late past her shift, and called the doctor back in when things turned dangerous. If you think she's unfit, you don't know her. She is the reason my mom is alive today. Within hours, her post had dozens of comments. She was with me during chemo. She taught me how to care for my dad after his stroke. She sat with my brother when no one else could. The HOA had tried to paint Angela as a nuisance. Instead, story after story flooded in, each one a brick in the wall of her defense. At St. Matthew's, the support grew louder. Maria Sanchez organized a letter-writing campaign. Doctors, nurses, aides, even janitors signed testimonials about Angela's excellence. Families of patients mailed in handwritten notes with phrases like, "Our angel in scrubs," and "a light in our darkest days." By the end of the week, the hospital lobby was overflowing with cards and flowers. Angela walked through in disbelief. Her name on banners students from the local high school had made. "We stand with Nurse Morris." Angela paused, stunned. "All this for me?" Maria touched her arm. "No, Angie, not for you. Because of you. Because of what you've done for all of us." Meanwhile, the HOA was on the defensive, their inbox filled with angry messages from residents and outsiders alike. One former patient wrote directly to the board, "How dare you attack the woman who kept my son alive through the worst night of our lives? Shame on you." Karen Whitfield tried to hold her ground, firing back with emails full of jargon about community standards. But the more she insisted Angela was unfit, the more ridiculous she sounded. Even some HOA members began to waver. At one meeting, a board member whispered, "Karen, this is getting ugly. People are furious. Maybe we should drop it." Karen's lips thinned. "Number, she doesn't belong here. If we back down now, we look weak." But the tide had already shifted. What began as whispers in the cul-de-sac had become a roar in the entire town. Angela was no longer just the target of harassment, she was a symbol, and the community was choosing sides. And for once, the HOA was badly outnumbered. The Maplewood Estates clubhouse was packed that night. Rows of folding chairs filled the room, and every one of them was occupied. Some residents stood in the back, arms crossed, faces tense. Others clutched signs hastily made at their kitchen tables. "Support our nurse." "Hands off Angela." Compassion over cruelty. Angela sat quietly in the front row, her mother at her side, Maria Sanchez on her other. She wore her work scrubs, not because she hadn't had time to change, but because they were her badge of honor. Every stitch, every stain, spoke of lives saved, of nights spent on her feet when the world slept. At the podium, Karen Whitfield adjusted her pearls and tapped the microphone. "Order, please. This is a formal meeting of the Maplewood Estates Homeowners Association." Her voice rang sharp, but the crowd wasn't cowed. Karen cleared her throat. "As you all know, we've had multiple violations from one resident. Parking infractions, improper property maintenance, disruptive behavior. These are not isolated incidents. They reflect a pattern." "Pattern of what?" a voice shouted from the back. "Coming home late after saving lives?" The room broke into applause. Karen's cheeks flushed. She raised her hand for silence. "Furthermore," she pressed on, "letters of concern were sent to her employer regarding her conduct." "You mean lies?" Mrs. Alvarez, one of Angela's neighbors, interrupted. She marched to the microphone without being called. "Let's call it what it was. Lies. And I won't stand by while you smear a woman who has done nothing but serve this community inside and outside the hospital." Applause thundered again. Karen's jaw tightened. Maria Sanchez stepped up next, holding a folder thick with papers. "These are letters from Angela's patients, co-workers, and doctors. Over 200 of them. They describe her compassion, her excellence, and the countless lives she's touched. I'll read just one." She unfolded a page. "Nurse Morris held my hand when my daughter died. She cried with me. She was family when I had none. If anyone doubts her character, they don't know her at all." The room fell silent, heavy with emotion. Several people dabbed at their eyes. Angela looked down, blinking away tears. When Maria finished, a patient in a wheelchair rolled forward, oxygen tank hissing softly at his side. His voice trembled but carried through the room. "I'm alive because of Angela Morris. The night my lungs gave out, she stayed by me when the doctor couldn't get there in time. She's the reason I'm breathing today. And you want to throw her out? Shame on you." The crowd erupted, cheers, clapping, shouts of agreement. Karen pounded the gavel. "Order! Order!" But her voice was drowned out. Finally, the HOA vice president leaned toward her, whispering urgently, "Karen, this isn't working. You're losing everyone." Karen glared, but the reality was undeniable. The residents weren't with her. The community wasn't with her. Even her own board members looked away, unwilling to back her crusade any longer. Angela stood then, her voice calm but clear. "I didn't ask for this fight. I didn't ask for this attention. All I wanted was to live in peace, raise my children, and do my job. But since you brought it here, let me say this. I'm proud of who I am, proud of what I do, and proud to call this community my home. No letter, no complaint, no prejudice will change that." The room thundered again, louder than before. People rose to their feet, clapping, shouting her name. Karen slammed the gavel once more, but this time her voice cracked. "Meeting adjourned!" she barked, before storming out, her heels striking the floor in furious rhythm. Angela remained, surrounded by neighbors, colleagues, and patients who embraced her, shaking her hands, thanking her through tears. For the first time since moving into Maplewood, she didn't feel like an outsider. She felt what she had always given others, belonging. The morning after the HOA meeting, Maplewood Estates felt different. The air itself seemed lighter. Neighbors who once peeked through curtains now waved from driveways. Children laughed freely on the sidewalks, Jordan's basketball echoing against the pavement without a single complaint. It was as if the weight Karen had tried to place on Angela's shoulders had lifted, and with it, the community's silence. Angela stood at her mailbox, expecting another envelope filled with cold accusations. Instead, she found a card signed by half a dozen neighbors. "We're glad you're here. Thank you for everything you do." Inside was a gift card to the local grocery store and a handwritten note. "For long shifts and long nights, you've earned a little help." Angela pressed the card to her chest, her throat tightening. For weeks, she had felt like an intruder in her own home. Now, the same neighborhood was beginning to embrace her. At St. Matthew's Hospital, things moved quickly. The administrators, furious at the attempt to sabotage one of their best nurses, drafted a formal statement. "Nurse Angela Morris is a valued and respected member of our staff. Her record speaks for itself. Years of service, countless patients healed, an unwavering standard of compassion. We stand behind her completely." The statement went public, printed in the local paper, and shared across town. Soon after, patients and their families began writing letters to the editor, telling their stories. The newspaper devoted a full-page spread to Angela, the nurse who wouldn't be silenced. The HOA had no defense left. The board, embarrassed by the public backlash, voted to withdraw all complaints against Angela. Karen tried one last time to protest, her voice sharp and trembling. "This isn't about her nursing. It's about the rules." But her fellow board members cut her off. "No, Karen. This is about decency, and you've gone too far." The motion passed unanimously. The letters stopped. The threats ended. And for the first time since moving in, Angela could park her car, hang her scrubs to dry, and let her children play without fear of reprisal. That weekend, the community gathered at the park for a neighborhood cookout. Angela hesitated at first, but when she arrived, people cheered. Kids ran up with hugs, parents shook her hand, and coworkers who lived nearby raised their glasses to her. Mrs. Alvarez, the neighbor who had first spoken up in her defense, clinked a fork against a glass. "To Angela Morris," she said, smiling wide, "a healer, a mother, a neighbor, and a fighter. We're lucky to have you." The crowd erupted in applause, voices echoing against the evening sky. Angela, blushing, lifted her cup. "Thank you for standing with me when I didn't know if I could stand alone. This house, this hospital, this community, it's all I ever wanted. A place to belong." Her children tugged at her hands, laughing, pulling her toward the games. Her mother sat nearby, rocking gently in her chair, pride shining in her eyes. And as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink, Angela felt it deeply for the first time since moving into Maplewood Estates. She wasn't just surviving here, she was home.